Hello, everyone. So I'm Donald May. I'm the Vice President and Creative Director of Lowy Design. We're a small design firm on Long Island. And as Greg said, I do have some publishing experience, but really my experience is in web development on a larger scale, a lot of it consumer and also business to business. So my talk today is really going to be about design, but more specifically, the user's experience when it relates to design. The funny thing for me is that this new buzzword, user experience, it's getting a lot of talk. But the reality is that user experience has been related to design since design existed. So if you think about like the very first thing that might have been designed, really that thing was related to the person that it was designed for. If you think about that a little bit more, now that experience has evolved to the point where we're essentially designing typefaces and things along those lines to allow that user's experience of driving, in this case, to be even that much more, just to involve that person just that much more. In the case of like typefaces for signage, great pains making sure that those fonts are readable at distances, at speeds, and those sorts of things. So there's a tremendous care that goes into the design of all these elements. And even like when it comes to, the automobile itself, I mean, obviously the experience of driving is one thing. The kind of car that you're in is another thing. But also now they're coming out with cars. This one happens to be a car that's a $100,000 electric car. So even the idea of, something that's super luxury, essentially super performance, and also eco-friendly. But design isn't only visual, especially now. As you're thinking about things like, Siri on the iPhone, that relates to sound. The idea of environments. Right now, there's essentially, sort of virtual environments that are being created for collaboration and those types of things. So that idea also needs to be designed. And if you think about touch, the tactile sense of either reading a printed piece or interfacing with, a tablet device or a mobile device, the sense of touch is important as well. But the ultimate goal is not really user experience. User experience is one way to get to the end game. But the actual end game is really user engagement. Are we, affecting users on an emotional level, on a physical level, on an intellectual level? That's where really design can play a part. The thing about the design that's kind of a challenge is that, what's good for today is not necessarily going to be good for tomorrow. The kinds of experiences people are having now, they're going to evolve. They're constantly evolving. There's constantly shifting paradigms. Things like design style, they change. From the Bauhaus era of design, which was in the 30s, to the postmodern era of design, which was in the 90s, to what's currently going on now and what's going to happen in the future. There's always this evolution of design style. There's an evolution of the environment as well. People aren't confined to their offices anymore, especially for your kinds of content. They might be in their offices, but they might be at their home. Or they might be looking at a device, in transit somewhere. And there's no single platform. Obviously, you have, basically desktops, mobile devices, phones, and really who knows what's next. What I also wanted to talk about a little bit was just current trends. There's essentially two major trends in design that are going on now with regard to interfaces. There's this idea of skeuomorphs. Let's see if I can get these to work. It might not be working because it's my iPad. Yeah. Skeuomorphs are basically essentially when design is echoes things that are real world. Like for instance, Apple's iCalendar. It looks like a blotter calendar, but there's no reason for any of that interface elements, those UI elements, in the actual application. It's something that, Apple decided to put in there to make us feel more comfortable. The opposite side of that is Metro style, which is kind of being showcased by the Windows 8, Windows Phone 7. That idea of a design is really about simplicity. Big buttons, Chrome is not important, content is important. So really that kind of interface design is something that you'll see a lot more of, in the future. I don't think these are playing either. Yeah, these aren't playing. And there's also trends that are happening in technology as well. I'm sure you probably have heard of HTML5 or CSS3. Maybe you've heard of jQuery, depending upon what your backgrounds are. These are things that are happening in technology that are making experiences for people that much better, that much more interactive, that much more cross-platform, and that much faster. jQuery as a technology is helping basically developers create mobile applications at speeds that they couldn't have if they had to program them all by hand. There's, within technology, there's frameworks that happen that allow developers to work more quickly. There's a greater emphasis on interactivity, processing even. Basically processing can happen on the browser side rather on the server side, so it's faster. And this idea of responsive, basically responsive design, which allows for fluid layouts that happen over different applications, different devices, those sorts of things. So I want to talk a little bit about just some of the work that we've done in this space. We did some work for institutional investor journals, as Greg said. The idea was really to create, for us, that was our first journal site. So for us, the concept of creating a journal site didn't really exist. We didn't know that we weren't supposed to make things really difficult to use, and we didn't know that we were supposed to make it look really stodgy. We didn't know that we were supposed to make the buying experience difficult, so we didn't. So what we tried to do was we just tried to make it, we took it basically as another website. We said, this is a bunch of content people need to see. They experience it in sort of segments, maybe an abstract first and then an article later. Maybe they want to save parts of an article, those kinds of things. So we kind of looked at it from, very sort of naive perspective, really. But the way that we looked at it actually helped us a lot and ultimately helped the publisher a lot because it created this user experience which was much more simplistic. Really, we thought about it from the perspective of, everybody that needs to use this content wants to interact with it in a certain way. So we tried to ultimately just change that experience to make it really easy for them. And we added some features to this site was done about 5 or 6 years ago, so the technology behind it now is actually a little antiquated. But some of the things we used was like jQuery frameworks that allowed content to be hidden until the user actually interacted with it. It created more of that white space that Greg was talking about on the page generally. There wasn't so much dense content. We also created a better shopping experience, which was more akin to a retail shopping experience that you'd have online. And we also helped out with creating better search through the site. We also did a little bit of work for University of California Press, one of the other journals we worked with. We just did some homepage design development for them. More of what we've done was with other publishing sites. Institutional Investor Intelligence is the newsletter division for Institutional Investor. And the same here, basically. The content is, similar to the kinds of content that are in a journal. Long articles. What we did was we took those articles, we broke them down into sort of pieces that were digestible as the reader wanted to experience them. So initially it was a list of headlines, top headlines, those sorts of things, and they related to the content on a slower basis. We didn't kind of bombard them with too much content all at once. And we did this across a number of publications. So there was this idea that, one, we'd need to make the content more accessible, but we'd also need to have a brand that was consistent. So, you know, even I think when it relates to brand, I think this idea of user experience is important. We also did work for institutionalinvestor.com, their parent site. Again, same thing here, really, was, you know, essentially figuring out ways to make the content just easier to access. There was a lot more video content in this site. We created a better search for them that allowed, you know, multiple keywords, multiple different, you know, searching through different kinds of content, whether it was video or text content. And now what we're working on is really taking these ideas and kind of essentially digesting them a little bit more and trying to create widgets from them. So our goal is really to essentially, you know, basically compartmentalize some of these design ideas that we have, repurpose them and for other sites. One idea is basically drag and drop. It's something that you can do with some of the newer technologies. You can have a user click on an element and drag it over to another element. So in a way that that could be used to say for a shopping experience. You know, in the past, shopping was through this big button that said buy now. But the reality is that people don't buy that way. People buy by putting stuff into a cart, you know, literally in our physical world. So that idea can actually happen in the digital space now with drag and drop. You basically click on an item and drag it into something that's called the cart. We also have this idea of smart clipping. One way that might be used for publishers would be if a user wants to take parts of an article to use for research in another piece that they're working on, what we'd want to do is we'd want to have them be able to clip parts of that article or highlight parts of that article and save those things, but also have that also capture all the information that's behind that clipping area. So for instance, if it was a photo that they were clipping, it would not only take the photo information, but it would also capture all the caption information, the photographer's information, the date that the photographer shot the photo, the copyright information for it. And we grab all those pieces so that there's this, you know, full thread of connected information to any item that they had on the page or that they wanted to save. One of the other things we're working on is hyperrelevance. It's kind of similar to the mind map thing that was in Melinda's presentation. What we're doing is we're thinking about searching or relevancy to an item in a lot of different ways that it can be related. So for instance, if it was an image, then there could be, you know, you could look at relevancy based on the fact that it's an image and find other images that are similar to it. Or if it's a piece of content about a certain area, maybe it's a regional area, you could find content related to that. So this idea of related content is not all that new, but what we wanted to do is make it more visual. And then the last thing is dynamic filtering. We've been working on search, different formats for search and filtering in a number of our sites, and having those things be essentially more dynamic. You know, so as you're clicking around on different items within a search field, that dynamically changes the page and brings up different things. So you know, these are sort of the things that we're looking at for you know, for development for publishers, but also for other sites that we're working on. And that's all.